Welcome everyone to this inaugural Ask Agri session. The aim of today's webinar is for us and our team and our partner at Leyton to give some expert advice and guidance into both our capabilities, grant funding, consortium building, and what makes a great R&D project. We're very lucky to have a talented team who have pulled together some incredible and managed some incredible projects at Agri-EPI, and they'll have an opportunity today to both tell you a little bit about those and to answer some questions you might have. Obviously, we're committed at Agri-EPI to research and innovation that is involving farmers, and so we'll be talking about our satellite farm network and how we can effectively collaborate with farmers, producers. Speaking today from Agri-EPI are Rebecca Lewis, McReddie, and Duncan Ross, and from Leyton we've got Matilda Hayward. I'm going to give them all a few minutes now to introduce themselves and talk about some of their previous work and capabilities at Agri-EPI and at Leyton. And we've got some pre-prepared questions which we'll be going through afterwards, and then we'll open up to questions from anyone in the audience after that. So, Rebecca.
Thanks, Tom. Morning, everybody. So I'm New Business and Proposal Manager at Agri-EPI Centre, and Tom asked me to just talk a little bit about how we support our members with funding applications. So we do that through project build, through providing industry connections, and you can just go back a slide a minute, Tom, also through providing links to farmers and end users, as well as our own inputs to projects where we can add value, which could include through access to facilities, test beds, technologies, expertise, all of which you'll hear about shortly. We also help with reviewing, coordinating and writing bids, the extent of which really typically depends on our level of activity within the project itself. So this isn't a chargeable service. There are plenty of professional bid writers out there. This is just sort of part of our contribution to projects and the way in which we support members. So I thought really I'd use this opportunity to offer some tips and advice on applying for funding. I'm sure within the audience there are kind of proper R&D funding veterans out there, and as well as those who are perhaps complete novices and all in between. So yeah, hopefully there's something that will resonate. There's lots of great resources out there. One in particular I'd highlight is the KTN's Good Application Guide, which is well worth a read, and I'll put a link to that in the chat in a bit. So, okay, Tom, do you want to move forward a slide? Thank you. So these are just a few salient points. Obviously I could go on and on, but I won't. So really, before even putting pen to paper, when you're thinking about your technology and the project that you're wanting to develop, these are just some questions that I think are helpful to ask yourself. So first of all, have you considered the market need? Are you really ensuring that you're solving a real problem in the marketplace rather than sort of pushing an interesting technology? So user engagement is really, really key. Have you got clear objectives in your project? I think it's important to make sure your project is really focused and generates usable outcomes, rather than trying to sort of throw everything into a single project. Sometimes it's better just to be focused and perhaps break it down into smaller chunks. Have you got the right team? What expertise do you need to bring in? Do you need, for example, academic input? Have you included maybe some potential customers or users of your technology? Any key partners that would be involved in commercializing it? Obviously, we've got lots and lots of links around industry and academia. We can perhaps help find those connections for you. What other resources do you need? So is it test beds? Are there particular technologies? Are there other inputs that you need, as well as the actual people and the skills? What other resources are required? Importantly, does it align fully with the scope of the competition that you're intending to apply into? It really isn't worth trying to shoehorn a project somewhere where it doesn't quite fit. It's better to build up your project and then wait for something where it's a good match, because these are always super competitive. Are you telling a great story? I think this is really, really important. You need to really connect and engage with the reader of your application, really get them on board and on side straight off and really tell them a compelling story as to why your project is going to be a success and why it is going to deliver a high impact. Linked to that, have you got a sound business case? This is super important, not only for your own business, your partners and collaborators, as well as making the case for why your potential customers would invest in your technology. What return does it deliver to them? And finally, does it deliver value for money to the funder and to the taxpayer? So is it meeting all of the funders' objectives, and what does it return to the economy, to wider society? Okay, next slide, please, Tom. So just a few kind of more practical points. First of all, I'd say particularly if you don't have lots of experience with innovation funding, make sure you really understand the process, both of applying for the funding, but also what happens next if your project is successful. What steps have to be taken to get the project set up, and what requirements are there for sort of reporting and administration, and what obligations you have to the funder as your project is running. Another really important one is to gather your evidence. You cannot put enough data and quantification in support of your application. Any claims that you're making about what impact your technology might have, or as you're defining your problem, as you're defining your target market, you really need to quantify, gather your evidence, gather your data. It's quite a lot of work actually to do that well. Demonstrate your route to market. So have you engaged with potential partners? Have you engaged with potential customers, and really show that in your application? Work with your user or your customer, really bring them along right from the very, very beginning of your sort of conception and development of your technology. It's really, really important to get their input on their requirements, their feedback as you go through the different stages of developing your technology. You cannot have enough user engagement, in my opinion. Within your team, within your partnership and your collaboration, make sure everyone's just aligned on what are their expectations, what are their goals, what are they hoping to get out of this project and beyond, and just make sure that everyone is really kind of being collaborative. And I would say, you know, collaborate in writing the bid. Don't sort of leave it to one person. If you can't collaborate in pulling the bid together, it doesn't bode well for the project itself. Be aware of costs. It's good to get a good idea, or at least a rough idea of the cost to deliver a project very early on, so that again you can manage expectations as to what can be delivered within a project budget. Yeah, share responsibility for the proposal. As I said, it should be a collaborative effort, and I think the best proposals that we see through Agri-EPI Centre are ones where everyone has had a strong hand in pulling it together and providing the evidence and you know, all of the plans that have to be shown through the proposal. Start early. It seems obvious, but really you cannot start early enough. Don't even wait for funding to come out. You can start planning your projects before funding opportunities are announced, and really kind of get off on the front foot. And I've said it before, but tell a story. It's really important to bring people along with you, to make sure you're as compelling and convincing as you can. There is a lot of funding that's shortly going to be coming out from various different sources. So if you're thinking of projects, if you're thinking of your R&D plans and strategies, then you know this is a really good time to start engaging. Thanks, Tom. That's me.
So good morning, everybody. My name's McReddie. I'm Agri-EPI's Business Development Manager for Livestock and Aquaculture. So I'm just going to take you through, in the next 5-6 minutes, Agri-EPI's livestock capabilities and how they might be useful as sites to test and trial and demonstrate technology as part of R&D projects. I won't be going through the aquaculture facilities today just because it's not relevant to the DEFRA funding, but if you do want more information on those, please reach out to anybody at the Agri-EPI team and we can send those on. So can I have the next slide, please, Tom? Yeah, brilliant. So probably by far Agri-EPI are best known in terms of livestock for the Southwest Dairy Development Centre, and this is already host to numerous R&D projects, particularly that have been funded by Innovate UK, but other sort of grant funding bodies as well. So this is a space that really is right in between that research capability and the commercial farm. So it's got all the capabilities of a university standard research farm, whilst giving you that sort of commercial reality to ground innovation and technology development in. So this facility has space for up to 180 cows, and you can develop, test and demonstrate all kinds of technologies there, whether that's data-driven, satellite, hardware, software, biotech, anything in that veterinary space. In terms of data collection, so we use automated robotic milking and feeding there. We use precision grazing, hyperspectral imagery and satellite data to sort of manage the health of that grazing platform. We have an array of animal health sensors there that are monitoring, just to name a few, sort of body condition score, lameness, somatic cell count, and more than that. We've just installed as well, which is really exciting, a range of environmental sensors, sort of monitoring different greenhouse gases and ammonia levels within that farm building, and especially pertinent to those funding calls that we see coming out of the British government, especially now, really wanting you to link the impact of innovation to net zero. And of course a visitors centre, where you can sort of look across the cows as you're having your meeting. Next slide please, Tom. Yep, so sort of a complementary facility there. The Southwest Dairy Centre is a flying herd, so doesn't have young stock, does not have calves at the facility. We do have a calf research centre that is specifically focused on looking into the health of the young stock. This is in partnership with SIUC, so this is at Crichton Royal Farm in Dumfries and Galloway. Obviously recognising that dairy young stock, have often been that sort of under-resourced enterprise on farm, and it's important to focus on the health of the young animal and how that can impact on the lifetime of productivity, especially when we're looking to be very efficient and reduce waste to work towards net zero. So in terms of the facilities we have on this campus, on the Barony campus, we can monitor the individual feed, forage, milk and water intake of every individual calf reared at this facility. We have individual weight gain monitoring, and we have animal health sensors, each have calf ice robotics ice cubes, and we have the Smart Bell well calf tags there as well. So we can build up a really comprehensive picture of young animal health. So if you have an innovation that is applicable for the young dairy animal, please get in touch with us to explore how you might sort of integrate the Calf Research Centre into your proposal. Next slide, please, Tom. Yeah, and the final of our sort of dairy smart farms, if you like, before I move on to dairy satellite farms later on, is the Midlands Dairy Development Centre. So this is in partnership with Harper-Adams University. Almost think of it a little bit like a scaled down Southwest Dairy in terms of size. It's not a grazed unit, it is an indoor unit only. And the focus of this unit is to look at cow behaviour and health and welfare and cow choice. And if we're thinking about, what is a happy animal, the research at this centre is all sort of looking into that. So it's a very adaptable space for behavioural studies. I speak to a lot of technology companies that really need a level beyond what a commercial farm can offer in terms of control, splitting a herd into 2 or 3 or however many, so that the animals all have the same experience, bar the innovation, so that you can really in-depth measure the impact that innovation has. And this is what this centre can offer, really adaptable and flexible space to split that herd. Again, it's a robotic milk unit, so we're gathering a lot of data about productivity and the health of the milk and milk yields and so on. We have robotics ice cubes on this site as well, and as well as the whole sort of ceiling of the building and being covered in cameras for 3D imaging and looking at the sort of social structures and behaviours that are going on within that group. So as you can see, in terms of dairy, and they're just our smart farms, not even our satellite farms, there's just such a range of facilities that can be used as part of a project. Next slide, please, Tom. And just to really show you that we're sort of not a one-trick dairy cow, we also have all those other sort of livestock facilities as well. The Midlands Piggery, a great example, another facility that's in partnership with Harper-Adams University, and also sort of best overall unit in the National Pig Awards a couple of years ago as well. So a really high quality unit. This as well does have the bonus that it comes with a home office license and lab facilities, and particularly focused on nutrition, microbiology and meat quality at that unit. So what it might be useful for you to know is an example of some research projects that have gone on or could go on at a facility like this. You can see that a lot of these are based on nutrition, so investigating the role of different vitamins in diets, the effect of different herbal products or feed additives, but then also differences between progenies of sialines, so we could look at genetics. So there's just so much option there with what you could do in terms of piggeries. If we're thinking about funding and net zero, we could be looking at the impact of different innovations on ammonia, or we could be looking at different nutritional options in terms of soya replacements, for example. Can I have the next slide, please, Tom? So there's a difference between, and I think Duncan would have just covered this before me, but I'll just very quickly note the difference between the sort of smart farms and the satellite farms, if you will, in that the smart farms are either wholly or partly Agri-EPI owned and Agri-EPI ran, at least to a certain degree, with our partners. Our satellite farms, of which there's many more, 24, I believe, across the UK, are commercial farms. So they are farms that we have partnered with commercial farmers, and we don't own those farms at all, but we have partnered with commercial farmers to provide you with test beds and facilities for innovation, testing and trialing and demonstrations. So essentially we have kitted out each of these farms with what we call a basic data collection package that may include, obviously it's personalized to the type of farm. You know, the data collection package on a dairy farm would differ from a beef farm or a sheep farm or a pig farm, and Duncan's, you know, arable farms as well. But basically each of them will have a satellite and drone platform, a weather station, IT and connectivity, and a workstation or meeting room, so that at least at a very basic level we can start to collect some really important data about the productivity of that farm and how that might relate to sort of any innovation. So if I could have the next slide, please, Tom. Again, just to give you an example of another type of livestock that we work with, this is beef. I'm not going to take you through any of the, simply because of a matter of time, poultry units or sheep units that we have, but we do cover all those livestock areas as well. This is an example of one of our satellite farms, a beef farm in Dunbar, Biel Grange, which is the sort of Jeffrey family farm. So here at this farm, they have 250 Aberdeen Angus cross sucklers, and they're also contract farmers. They're calving and they're finishing, so we've got that full life cycle. We've installed the Ritchie, on top of the basic data collection package that I mentioned, the Ritchie beef monitor, Affimilk silent herdsman collars, as well as a quadcopter drone for aerial imagery of the field. So what you can understand is that we're building up a really comprehensive picture using evidence and data to show the productivity levels on that farm, and therefore when we implement your innovations as part of a research program, we can really see the impact that that's having. Like I say, we don't stop there. There is sheep, there is poultry, and there is aquaculture, and so if you're wanting more information on any of those facilities, please do get in touch. And I will leave there, and hopefully we can go back to Duncan.
So I'm the business development manager for the crops horticulture section for Agri-EPI. And my role is basically similar to Cassie's, but on the crops side, based out of Cranfield University, which is the hub I work from, the southern hub of Agri-EPI. Next slide, please, Tom. So our crop and soil health solutions is based at the southern hub. We partner with Cranfield University, which is obviously based there, and our sister organisation, CHAP, Crop Health and Protection. And our aim is to sort of improving food supply chains and sustainable solutions. So we do lots of different projects, mainly focused, or a lot of it focused on the glasshouse facility that's in the background behind me. So there's the plant growth studies, interactions between soil and crop. Phenotyping is a key part of that facility, and root phenotyping with plastic tubes that actually are inserted into the soil that can 360 visualize the roots as they're growing, developing in the project. We're doing projects with linking sort of storage facilities and how pre-harvest applications of technology result in different post-harvest outcomes. Obviously, climate change is very high up the agenda. Greenhouse gas emissions from what's going on farm, soil emissions from interaction with engaging in soil, so ploughing compared to min-till or direct drilling. There would also be projects on seed technology and crop establishment. I can highlight some of those. They're doing one particularly at the moment on miscanthus establishment, which is quite relevant to creating biomass that can be used for use in heat and energy production, and technology around that. I think that's the end of that. Next slide, please, Tom. There's a few more there. Just go back a sec. So yeah, again, trials with agrochemicals and biostimulants, biopesticides. We're very interested in remote sensing and have capability with satellites, and access to satellite information, drones, and also robots. And as robots are coming, we're going to have our own robotic platform very shortly. And then a lot of capability in both lab and field deployable spectrometry. Okay, next slide, Tom, thanks. So going back to the glass house facility, we have a gantry which contains some very sophisticated sensor equipment. We have hyperspectral cameras, multispectral cameras. We have RGB, we have fluorescent camera, we have LiDAR. So each of them has a different capability of looking at crops and how they interact with their environment. So we're able to do quite detailed projects in there, looking at how disease may affect wheat yields, for example, and how that then can be implicates what happens in the field. So you can really get some in detailed studies of what's going on that then you can interpret into field scale projects. The post-harvest optimization, we have the cold store capability where we are looking at how long-term and short-term storage can be impacted by controlling the gases in the chambers, but also the temperature. And obviously the importance behind long-term and short-term storage is the ability to produce or sell as much first-class produce out of store. There's inevitably going to be some losses, but if you can limit those losses, obviously first-class produce is what makes you the profit. And then also we have a huge range of field and lab-based solutions. One of the key ones on there is in the top left of the right-hand picture, which is the soil flux chambers, which are quite a sophisticated piece of equipment measuring gases from the lower surface of the soil, the interaction between the soil and the very lowest atmosphere, and how different techniques of farming practice can impact on emissions from soil. So you could be looking at how fertilizer may be wasted, that's not actually being used by the plant, but it actually is being released by ammonia. Next slide, please, Tom. So as Cassie's mentioned already, we have 28 satellite farms, 24 of them are the commercial ones, and 4 are hubs based at the hubs you see on the red dots around the country. A wide geographical spread, so we're sort of combating some of the weather differences around the country. There'll be a huge difference in sectors. So again, Cassie's listed the ones that are livestock, but we also have capability across the crop sector from horticulture, onions, potatoes, peas, and your main combinable crops as well. So we work very closely with these satellite farmers. It's our sort of USP, I suppose, in our ability to take projects out to a commercial farm and actually use those farmers and get feedback from those growers on how that technology can benefit them. And that sort of engagement with growers is really crucial, I think, in what we're talking about today, because they can help steer the direction of project development and sensor development, and whether it's useful or not. And if it's not useful to them, they will tell you. And I think most farmers will be quite blunt in telling you, well, that's no good because of X, Y, and Z, which is really helpful if you are looking to develop a technology on farm. Next slide, please. So a project example would be something we've perhaps been approached by a company or an academic institution or an individual. We would have discussions of that idea and look how we could scope out a potential project. We would then use our network of academics and other businesses and potentially the end user who would want to collaborate in a project that we could bring together. And we'd have to develop that proposal and bring the work packages and outcomes into that proposal. Funding opportunities could come anywhere in that list. I put it, number 5, I think it was, but it could come up at the top. So we could identify a funding opportunity, and then the approach would come on the back of that funding opportunity. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in that order. And then we'd also support with bid writing and submission into a fund. And if it's successful, obviously we will be there to support and help along with the project right from start to finish, and also use it as a way of disseminating outputs to our network and the wider community of agriculture. I think that's possibly me. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. That was really great. So Matilda, I know you didn't have any prepared slides, but it'd be really great if you could introduce yourself and Leyton and a little bit about your capabilities and services.
Yeah, no, fantastic. Thanks, Tom. So my name is Matilda. I'm a senior technical consultant at Leyton, who are innovation funding specialists. So a bit of background about Leyton. The Leyton group work to help innovative companies become more profitable and help support them in their growth plans. Leyton UK offer a whole range of different services to assist companies in accessing additional funding for their research activities, and also to help businesses free up some cash flow. Our primary focus is in sort of government innovation incentives, so things like patent box and R&D tax credits. I'm sure a lot of the people that are here today are already well aware of what the R&D scheme is. So if you're considering applying for any of DEFRA's new funding opportunities, then the chances are you're already doing R&D, and you're probably already aware that you're doing R&D. So I won't really go into what the scheme is and whether or not you can determine if you're eligible. But I think the key question that a lot of people here might have is whether or not applying for any of these new funding opportunities or any other forms of grant applications, how does that impact your eligibility to submit an R&D claim? And if it does impact it, how? So hopefully that's sort of some of the questions that I'd be able to answer today, either through the Q&A, through the panel discussion, or if you do want to get in touch, I think my email is somewhere on a slide somewhere. So do feel free to contact us afterwards as well.
Thanks, Matilda. Yeah, don't worry, we'll make sure we share your email as well. Duncan, I noticed you had your hand up. Was that on purpose or by accident? Sounds like it was an accident. So we've got some prepared questions, and then obviously some questions have come through on the Q&A and through the chat already. The first one, I think, and this is to you, Rebecca, is there any chance you can just give a quick recap about what competitions are coming up that people should be aware of?
Yeah, okay. I mean, there's actually several competitions coming up that people may well be aware of or might need to be aware of. So probably the one that most people are starting to talk about now, that we're starting to get inquiries about, is the various funding competitions that DEFRA announced last month through their farming, or following on from their farming innovation pathways competition that was earlier this year. So there will be, I mean, the full, I should just say, the full details of these funding competitions are not yet, have not yet been released. But what we do know is that there are 3 different strands from DEFRA's R&D partnership scheme coming up next month. So the first is the research starter, which is for 12-month projects of up to around about 50 to 60,000, and they're aimed directly at farmers and growers, and helping farmers and growers to build teams to explore bold and ambitious, innovative ideas. So it's very much targeting farmer-led activity. The second strand is for feasibility studies, and they'll be of up to 2 years in duration and up to $500,000 in total project cost. So feasibility studies are really there to inform the decision making of how to take forward an innovation. And then the next one is for small R&D partnerships. So these are larger scale projects, so for up to 3 years in duration and between 1 and 3 million in total cost. So this is for solutions that are going to substantially improve productivity, resilience and sustainability across agriculture and horticulture. And then, so that's what's coming out next month. But we also know that early next year or during next year, there'll be further R&D funding for large R&D partnerships. So again, substantial projects, sort of 3 years plus in duration, and with quite large budgets. So good opportunities for large collaborations. So that's what's coming out of DEFRA. As I said, there are other funding opportunities. So, you know, if you want to discuss in more detail, get in touch with us.
So there's definitely a lot of opportunities, and I think, yeah, there's a large amount of focus on this second DEFRA round, which I guess we all know the main aim of this fund is to put growers and producers in touch with whether it's technology businesses, research partners. I guess this question is open to everyone, but I should want to start is what is the best way for people to engage with those partners, and particularly I think with the growers and the farmers themselves, to get these, to kickstart these projects.
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that one, Tom. I think the Agri-EPI, oh, is that okay? The Agri-EPI membership is quite vast and it's varied as well. So we're about 200 members at the moment, and those include a whole host of farmers, not only that you can reach through the satellite farms sort of on an individual level that Duncan and I sort of introduced, but also we've got a lot of the retailers, processors, industry bodies, etc., all within our membership base as well. And so if you're looking to reach a particular member of the supply chain or a particular group of farmers in a certain area, then I would definitely say get in touch and see if Agri-EPI can sort of put you in touch in that way. You know, we're a great route to go down for building industry connections and collaborations. That's sort of the whole point of bringing this really great varied membership together.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a kind of a farm to fork network, which is very unique, I think. Rebecca or Duncan, Matilda, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, yeah, get in touch, because if, you know, have the discussion, we can perhaps point you, as Cassie said, to other people who can collaborate with you. But it may be that technology has already been developed and disproved. You know, perhaps we can suggest, have you done a patent search? Is there something that you're trying to reinvent the wheel that's already been done? So it's a case of, you know, have that conversation early.
And talking of having conversations early, what do you think is the right time to start engaging farmers and producers? Because obviously there'll be people at different stages, whether it's a feasibility all the way through, and it'd be good to understand from your experience, you know, when they should start obviously reaching out to us, but reaching out to us in at what stage it's relevant to farmers, and when they should be getting farmers into that innovation method.
Should I start with that, Tom? I would say it is never too early, and I think a really good place to start thinking about you know, any kind of innovation is by speaking to farmers. I can give an example of that. We were able to bring some technology developers onto a farmer's top fruit grower, and they were able to have really good discussions with growers, agronomists and so on. So really understand production systems, understand the operating environment, understand the whole context of these farming operations, hear from growers directly about what their pain points, what their problems are, and then, you know, develop solutions that are aligned with those, rather than perhaps developing something almost in isolation and then finding a place for it within agriculture, which arguably is sort of the wrong way round. So I would say it's never too early, and right throughout that development journey, for want of a better word, getting that feedback and that sort of two-way exchange of ideas is really, really important.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, Rebecca, I suppose we've all been hampered in the last 18 months in not being able to get out on farm and on site with companies and introduce them to, the real life issues that are happening on farm. I was lucky enough to go out to a vineyard yesterday and had a discussion with a robotic company and the grower and see how they could work together. So it's really important to have those discussions, and even if there's no funding on the horizon immediately, like we know there is, we can at least start talking about stuff and start developing an idea that can be tailored to a funding call that's coming up at some point.
I think just to add on to that, if you are having those really early stage conversations, it can be really, really beneficial if you are aware of all of the different types of potential funding opportunities that might be coming up for all of the different collaborators over the next few years. Those types of discussions can really help sort of maybe alleviate any potential concerns, particularly with quite highly experimental R&D. It's much easier if you can sort of forecast a return on investment, if you're aware of what additional funding each of the different projects can bring in terms of R&D tax credits or potentially even passports further down the line, and predicting what those additional benefits might be. So if you do have sort of those conversations at the start, it's much easier to form sort of those financial planning stages. You can forecast your ROI, and also that can help with if you're going to be applying for those schemes, you can then start the early stages of planning for that and collecting the data that's necessary in order to submit those applications.
Thanks, Matilda. I think a question as well, which I think is probably relevant and you might be able to answer, is around, and this is probably to help with encouraging collaboration with farmers. If a farm or a farmer invests its time in trying something which is unsuccessful, or if there's a cost to this, are they eligible for reimbursement? How does that work?
Yeah, it's I think unsuccessful projects, they definitely do qualify as R&D, and they are eligible for the R&D scheme, providing that the other criteria is being met as well. It's quite interesting. So when you look at the different sources of funding that are available for innovative projects, grant funding is upfront funding, rather than maybe a potential feasibility stage or a design phase. A lot of it is upfront, so you don't know whether or not that project is going to be successful or not, and that's the whole point in R&D. Is it's trying something that's new. Whereas because the R&D tax relief scheme is retrospective, there's a bit of a misconception around it in terms of, it has to have been successful in order for you to be able to claim for that work done. But that's not true. It's still very, very valid R&D. It's really, really valid research. A lot of amazing research doesn't actually end up working the way that you want it to, but often it are the projects that cost the most amount of money, people spend the most amount of time on. So definitely don't get the wrong idea that you can't claim for those projects.
Brilliant. No, thank you. That's very helpful. So there's been quite a few questions in the chat pop up about the satellite farm network. We didn't bring anyone from the network onto the call, but I don't know if there's any of the team, Cassie or Duncan, that want to pick up on those and the potential development for satellite farm network.
I've been trying to, obviously we don't have anybody from Agri-EPI that directly works in the technical satellite farm team here today, but so I've been trying to reply to people in the comments. I know that we've had a couple of comments saying that there's a shortage of farms in the West, be that in England or Wales or Scotland, just generally in the West. So what I will say is that the smart farm network has been developed in and around where Agri-EPI staff are based in their personal lives for initial ease of setup. We are expanding. It's the key that we're focusing on at the moment is to improve the evidence base coming out of our existing smart farms, but there is a beef and sheep farm planned for Wales, and we have a pig farm now in Northern Ireland, and in terms of the west of Scotland we have the Marine Aquaculture Innovation Centre on Loch Fyne. In terms of the location that satellite farms are based, what we've tried to do here is establish data-driven farms. So when we are collecting evidence for how your innovation's performing on farm, what we're doing is we're using technology to do that. So to a degree, and especially with Agri-EPI staff being based nearby and therefore able to support, to a degree, we're taking away the need for you as an entrepreneur or a company to really be based anywhere near that farm. So we're pulling the data that is evidencing the impact of your innovation off of that farm into the cloud, and you can view that from anywhere in the country or the world, really. So I would say probably don't put too much emphasis on, oh, you know, the farm that would be suitable for me is in Somerset and I'm in Edinburgh. No, it really doesn't matter, actually, because of the data-driven nature of these farms. And we've found that this has just generally not been a problem in projects, full stop.
Yeah, I think there is others coming online, as I think has been mentioned. There's one that wasn't on the map that's in Kent, a very big progressive producer down there. And also, as Cassie has mentioned, something in Wales that's, again, not on the map as yet, but will be happening. So it's just a case of resourcing everything, and there's a cost implication to doing that, I think.
Yeah, and I think to Cassie's point, this was, as I said at the very beginning, the inaugural AskAgri, and we are already planning another event which will be focused more on the technical team and the satellite farms team that we have at Agri-EPI. So this is only a small selection of the talent and capabilities that we've got. So we could probably focus on some of those questions in the further session. There was, I don't know if anyone wants to pick up this question about international funding. Obviously, I think that tends to be a bit more tricky. I don't know if anyone's got anything to say on that.
I suppose the first thing to say is, to a much smaller degree, the Agri-EPI Smart Farm network doesn't stop in the UK. So at present, we have a farm in Paraguay, which mainly focuses on beef. We have a farm in China, which mainly focuses on pigs, and we have a farm in New Zealand that mainly focuses on dairy. The sort of overall objective of these farms being that if and when international funding from that country or bilateral funding that brings both countries together comes up, we have a ready-made site in this country for Agri-EPI members to use. Out with R&D funding, these farms can be used as sort of soft landing pads, if you like, for Agri-EPI member technology companies to explore new markets. So I think absolutely get in touch for international funding. We've sort of got quite a bit of experience working with bilateral funding pots and Horizon 2020 and EIT Food and so on. So, you know, the book doesn't stop with Innovate UK and DEFRA.
Thank you, Cassie. So we're just waiting for any more questions to come in on the chat. So there's a question, a theme that seems to keep coming up around farmers and access into farmers. What is there a way that we can better that people can better understand what the needs of the farmers are before going out and developing technology? And you know, should they be engaging with the farmers before they're even actually looking at developing the technology, and how best to do that?
Yeah, I think just from our sort of discussions that we've had at Leyton with the sector, there are sort of various key themes of challenges that are sort of quite consistent across the entire industry, that sort of lead to the forefront of innovation. So things like, I guess, changing legislation and regulations surrounding sort of what chemicals, what products farmers can use, trying to future-proof against potentially upcoming changes as well, whilst mitigate against loss of yields. Boosting sustainability is a really, really key sort of area where a lot of companies are trying to innovate. But also sort of just meeting the demand for higher quality products, higher yields. So there is a lot of pressure on the industry, and there's a lot of challenges that the sector are facing, but they're fairly consistent based on most of our conversations. So I think as long as you are sort of the technology that you're developing is addressing a lot of these key challenges that we sort of gathered just through conversations, then that's definitely an indication that it will be relevant.
Thank you, Matilda. So a question's come in from Trev, which is about the availability of greenhouses for equipment trials. I mean, I think something that a lot of people might not be aware of is obviously we have the facilities at Agri-EPI. We also have a huge number of equipment assets as well. Does anyone on the BD team want to kind of give a bit overview of how that works and how people could potentially make use of this vast amount of equipment and facilities?
Yeah, it's probably my area, I guess. Glasshouse. We don't have any of our own assets, if you like, as a Glasshouse, but we do have partners with CHAP and with Cranfield, who do have Glasshouse capability. I believe there is some small Glasshouse capability at Harper Adams as well. So we can make some introductions to others in our network if it's Glasshouse you're particularly interested in.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that to talk a little bit more about the equipment, the wider equipment outside of greenhouses and glasshouses that Tom was relating to. So as well as the satellite farms, the on-farm facilities that we've talked about today, Agri-EPI have literally hundreds of pieces of sort of mobile, analytical or lab-based equipment that can be used as part of projects. So one example of this is a sort of really unique offering that Agri-EPI has is access to a mass spectrometry capability. So if you were looking to analyse volatile organic compounds, as you know, related to net zero, of course, we have the capability to offer you access to a lab-based mass spectrometry capability in Edinburgh or a field-based mass spectrometry capability that we can bring to farm so that you can analyse the impact of your innovation on this really specific sort of analytical need. On top of that, we have an array of different analytical pieces of equipment, all kinds of sensors to do with livestock pregnancies. We have a suite of hyperspectral cameras, all just examples of pieces of equipment that can be taken out of the Agri-EPI lab onto farm or onto whatever site you need them to be used. And really simply, commercially or as a part of a grant funding, they're just charged on a day-to-day basis like you were renting a car. So really straight up. And if you want to learn more about any of these pieces of equipment, or you think, hey, God, I wish I had access to this, just drop us a message and check.
Yeah, and I think that's a fairly good place to wrap up. I mean, a lot of the questions that come in have been very specific, and I think would probably be best being answered by someone in the BD team. So, I mean, obviously, we've shown everyone, including Matilda's emails at the beginning, but we'll make sure we circulate that with everyone who's attended this. But I think, as Cassie said, you know, anyone who's got any interest in these areas and about potentially building projects and how to engage with farmers or make use, that's a good place for us to get in touch with us. Matilda, anything else that you'd like to add potentially on some of the specifics around tax relief or claiming capital costs back, which is quite more of a niche area that our BD team aren't quite so familiar with?
Yeah, I guess the crossover, I guess, between grant funding and tax relief is probably an area where we do get quite a few questions. So the good news is you can still claim R&D tax relief on your grant funded projects, but the way that you claim does vary depending on sort of the size of the grant, the type of the grant that you're receiving funding from, how the duration of the funding, as well as sort of the size of your company. So it does impact specifically the types of costs you claim for, as well as it is likely to reduce your tax benefit rate slightly, but with the idea being that the grant funding more than subsidises any loss you'd get in your typical R&D tax claims. I guess in terms of quantifying it, it's a little bit more tricky because it does vary sort of case by case depending on the grant, the company, and things like that. One of the key differences is your subcontracted expenses. So things like external consultants or external specialists that you bring in to assist in an R&D project. Often that typically makes up for the agri sector. That does make up quite a sizable portion of the R&D tax claims. And that is an area where grant funding might impact the eligibility of those costs. But if you're worried about it, have a chat and we can help kind of assist you to make sure that you're making the most out of all of your different funding options that are available to you to support your R&D projects. But it is better to have those conversations kind of early on so you can plan for the different funding opportunities.
Thank you, Matilda. I know Duncan's got to nip off in a second. So there's just one quick question that they had come in around vertical farming. And I know you and I have spoken about this. Duncan, is that something we're looking to develop? Is that an area that we can help with, indoor, vertical, whichever of the terms you want to use?
Again, it's not one of our specialities. We can direct you to different other partners in our network to if you're looking at technology in particular. If it's things like sensor development, then yes, we can certainly be involved.
Brilliant. So there's anyone who's asked questions in the chat that we weren't able to answer on this, obviously we'll do our absolute best to get back to you. And as I said, we'll be doing a follow-up session in future. Does anyone, Matilda or anyone else on the BD team, do you have anything else you want to say before we wrap up this session?
I would just say get in touch through the various channels, whether it's direct by email or through the website or however you want to, and it will get directed to the right person.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just ask. We know most of the time we can help. Sometimes we can't, but you'll never know if you don't check.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for attending. And as I said, we'll follow up on the back of this.
Excellent. Thank you all for attending.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for attending, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Everybody, thank you.